It's like, hey, you can talk about big vision and you're going to do this, that, and the other thing, and it's going to be wonderful. But now, if that team has not been upskilled, if that team is just expected to fall in line and do something, but without guidance and support, I find that that's actually, it doesn't honestly really matter what the CEO says because he or she is not doing it. It's those folks below who then say, I need help. They raise their hand. They call people like us to help them out. And I think we're in that phase and we're going to be in that phase for a long time.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. A little note, Eric Layland of the Matters Group's last podcast interview with me for Mediascape, my USC podcast, just came out recently. But we were laughing because in the time since then, we've both been doing so much more in this world of marketing and digital and innovation and artificial intelligence. And I'm really excited to dive into some of the things Eric's been working on in the last few months since we last spoke. And then we'll backtrack and get into the company and the other topics that were our main focus for discussion before we started chatting this time. So Eric, thank you so much. I really enjoy every conversation we have and seeing what innovations and, what you're working on.
Well, Annika, it's good to see you again or speak again. And it's been, as we were just lamenting, sort of how fast the year has gone by. And wow, I keep thinking it's June and there's still the second half is not quite here yet, but it's here and it's well underway. And yeah, it's just been a whirlwind.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to say I love all of your posts on LinkedIn. All of the things that you write about are things that I'm interested in engaging in with marketing, AI, growth marketing, how to use artificial intelligence for customer experience, and these other areas and use cases that we all, as marketers, branders, businesses, need to know how to use properly. So you're the principal consultant founder, of course, for Matters Group, which is marketing modernization. But before we, again, talk about a lot of the things that you're working on now, you're talking about these key areas that you've really been diving into beyond your work as a leader.
Yeah. And so just a real quick, like the last 30 years in maybe 30 seconds. Yeah, I came up through digital marketing in the early days, 1996. And it was funny. I think my first day at my .com company I was at the time was September 6th, 1996. So 96. So I've been doing it a fairly long time. And it just kind of came up through developing websites, running net marketing programs, started a couple agencies, did that, rolled off into some management consulting for a little bit, then kind of Matters is kind of that management consulting sandwich between the beginning of Matters and what is, I think, going to be the next version of Matters that is focused primarily on marketing modernization. But, seen it all in the digital space, specifically marketing. But one of the things that I'd never really, both for myself and my clients, never really had my hands kind of dirty in and really digging into was data strategy. My favorite tool was Google Analytics when it came out in the first 10 years or so. Right now, I'm not a super fan of it, but GA4, thumbs down, but that's another topic for another day. But no, the insights that it gave folks and this, a free tool that was easy to set up, easy to use, and really can share insights with our clients on their campaign performance at the time. But then as I started to get the bigger roles, I saw that, this issue of data is really, it goes outside just your traditional, say, acquisition marketing or media performance measurements, and it really touches a lot of marketing. And that got me interested in, data issues would often be just passed off to someone on the IT team, and they kind of ran with it on behalf of marketing. But I think now what we've come into is a time where marketers really need to understand the data that their programs generate, and not just that what it generates and showing performance, but kind of, again, this is not the sexy section of marketing and branding, but data strategy, data protection. You are handling consumer data that may have personally identifiable information. And some of these issues that really weren't on the radar of marketers for at least the first probably 20 plus years of my career. So I got interested in this and decided to just really dig into it. I don't, for some reason, I think it came to my mind around Christmas. Maybe I needed something to do or so I just dove into it for the first couple months of this year, and it's not quite ready for prime time, but I end up creating about a 40, what will be, it's right now 40 some odd pages, but a workbook for marketers to like, how do you think about data to drive your programs? And again, not just acquisition and media performance, but just broadly, but also how to interact and collaborate with others in your organization that maybe have historically been involved with data security and data strategy. So folks on the IT side, folks in legal and governance. Governance is an area that I think is going to also be a really important aspect for marketers moving forward. I think, generally there's best of intentions that are made in programs when they're created and launched, but governance kind of sets a structure for you and your organization about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and why you're doing it the way you are.
Yeah.
And it kind of provides or creates this, I wouldn't necessarily call it a safety net because you can still screw things up, but it's a bit of scaffolding around sort of what you're doing and it's bringing some of these issues such as data security, publicly identifiable information about consumers to the forefront. And it's putting it on the radar for marketers. And I think, for enterprise marketers, hey, they've been aware of this for a while, but when you start to look at what's happening now and marketers today in small to mid-sized businesses, they need to be aware of this. And that's what I want to try and help them do is catch up and say, hey, be able to at least speak the language of governance and data strategy and data security within a marketing context. So that was my first quarter of this year, was trying to just dig into that and then create this, what I hope will be an asset for others to use and at least educate themselves and be able to have a little bit more confidence in an area that I know is not forefront for a lot of marketers.
100%. I mean, data is everybody's job now, especially as we look at, the convergence of ad tech and martech, talking about mad tech and how every person on the team needs to know exactly what's going on and be able to utilize it for the same goals. And it's not just about, of course, every country in the United States, every state has different privacy regulations. In California, we have the CPRA, which is as close as I think the US gets to the GDPR. GDPR in Europe is and in the UK, the UK's version are so much more advanced in terms of how they look at data protection. I was just telling you, I was just in the UK for a few weeks, and every time I went on a website, boy, those pop-ups and making sure that I understood exactly what cookies I was accepting or not accepting, so on point.
Yes.
So much more than we're used to seeing, perhaps, in the United States. But then we also have this issue of artificial intelligence and LLMs, and are people using it in a safeguarded way with a subscription? Are they using free versions of chatbots and maybe putting information that they aren't in? We're talking about some things you and I have talked about previously, which is how are people searching for information? What information is available for search? We're talking about personalization of our customer bases as things start moving toward, things are in Web3, and we're talking about agentic AI and perhaps having our own agents that help us do things in our lives, or how, somebody's consumer agent will talk to a business agent to make a sale. So getting into, obviously I'm going down all of these things that you and I get really excited about. But if we don't know the basics, if we don't have that foundational respect for our customers' data at all levels, then you're not going to have trust. You're not going to have efficiency. You're not going to know how to best serve your clients, and you're not going to have a business.
Yeah. And, it sounds like maybe we're talking more IT talk right now, but think about trust, what you just said. What is the essence of developing a brand? It's trust, that the value you're producing and ideally delivering to your client base, that they receive it and say, yeah, that's valuable. I trust this entity as part of, in my ecosystem of how I live my life, whatever it is. I mean, it spans everything. But if you don't have that trust, or you breach that trust that's been established by lackadaisical efforts on protecting data, you've potentially destroyed or caused seriously harm to your brand. And so these things that might on the surface not feel like it connects to brand or the day-to-day marketing grind of going out, getting customers, getting messages out in the market, delivering on that message and building loyalty over time, it all comes down to data. And that is a change. It's happened, in the almost now 30 years that I've been in the digital marketing space, but it's the reality that we live in now. And I've asked you one quick question because you mentioned it when you were talking about search. And I came up as a search engine marketing PPC guy, SEO guy, like way back in the day, before there was even conversion tracking, before there was daily budgets that you say. It was just like roll the dice and hope you hit the mark. But have you noticed any changes in how you search? Because I have totally changed.
Yeah.
Now almost every search I do is phrased as a question. And I don't know if others have done the same.
Well, and it's also, I mean, speaking of Google earlier, right? Traffic is down in search 35%, at least the last time I read, which I will say I haven't read much in the last 4 weeks, because people are moving, we were talking about the move to TikTok and YouTube for search. And now we're talking about everybody's using LLMs to search. And that's the same thing we were talking before we jumped on also about my new agentic product that I used for my podcast. Now other people are saying, oh, I want to use that for my podcast or to find the right podcast to get on. Where I'm doing it is search. It is basically, though, having my criteria for the podcast and going in and saying, here's my criteria. Are these people who, on this massive wait list, who's really qualified as a guest? And so it is a way of me asking, because I can toggle back and forth between the different LLMs. What's the information that you have on this person? Do they meet these criteria? How and why? How can you justify this? Because that's much deeper research than I can do in a few minutes, right? In 2 minutes, I can get back everything I need to know, including topics, why they rate, where they might be, they might not exactly meet, red flags. This is data that it would take me forever to data mine or my team. And I get at the tip, just like that. And so we're seeing this move, and we're even seeing for me, we need to make sure that and I have URL saved, but I haven't done this work yet, but that we have our own websites, right? Because we are our own brands, even outside of our businesses. And we need to make sure those associations come up for us as well when we're talking about thought leadership and expertise and branding.
And another thing I think is interesting, I don't know that I've seen it a lot, but it's where that search is done. And I can see the potential of, and this is a little bit, this idea is actually forming as we're talking, and some of the comments you've made, is that search being integrated into applications and like real search, not just searching within the app, but going out, doing a search, pulling information back. So bringing that action of search directly to where the user is, not having to go out to a specific search engine and do that query, but actually integrated into just the typical workflow. So it doesn't become a separate workflow. That research, as you said, is like it's integrated into what you're doing right now as something that you can just type in that question. Hey, is Joe Smith legit when he said he did this, and bring that back right in real time? And I don't think that's far away. And it does really change. I think, Google has been diversifying their business model for a while, but is Google search today what Google search is going to look like next year, next week, whatever? Because I think things are changing.
Oh gosh, we have so many tangents to go off on. But even in the context of using LLMs to search, I've run my prompts for, here are my 4 criteria, this guest, that guest, through one of my favorite tools for writing and for thought partnership, which is Claude. But then I find that I actually get better results when I use ChatGPT for that specific type. And so that's the other thing, is people understanding what LLM to use that works best for each use case in what you're doing. But beyond that, then as we keep on going and talking about search and bringing information into a website, it makes me think about personalization and dynamic
Really.
websites. So when I come into a website, if I'm on a travel website, it knows who I am, where I usually travel to, what kind of incentives might help make me buy a ticket on that airline versus going and doing a whole bunch of research on other airlines, or even going back to the airline. I've gotten emails, happy birthday. My birthday's in December. Here's a free seat upgrade that you have to use this month. Well, I'm not going to buy a last minute ticket probably in December. So that has no value for me. And it shows they don't really understand me as a customer. But now, with all of this data and having a full data strategy and really knowing our customers and using this wonderful tool we have in artificial intelligence, it can customize that. So happy birthday. We're going to give you $100 off your next trip to XYZ place that you seem to visit a lot, right? Or some other incentive that would be more meaningful. And so I'm really, really excited about this conversation and what you're saying about the data strategy and how we need to safeguard the data on one side, but we also need to use it to be better marketers, be better brands for our customers.
I'm absolutely. And then, the interesting thing too is that even as an individual, and I'm speaking totally as myself, looking at going to sites, as you mentioned, and you get in Europe and you get fed all the, accept cookies and what do you want to allow to track, and you can customize it. At first, I was just like, sure, all. It was either accept all or reject all, accept all or reject all. But now, and this is just literally a few months later, my behavior has changed. And now I'm going in and setting it specifically, those settings, configuring them to how I think I'm going to interact with this brand long term.
Nice.
If it's the first time, maybe I might reject all because I'm not quite in their community yet. But if it's somebody that I trust, a brand that I trust, I can say, you know what? I know these guys. I purchase their goods and services, what have you. Sure, accept all. And that's another thing that I think is, again, as a longtime digital marketer, I'm conscious to this and I've noticed my own behavior change, but I think we'll see general behaviors change over time. And it'll be interesting too, how that sort of user experience is. I mean, the little pop-up thing that comes up and there's 100 different flavors of it. At what point does it become either some way where it becomes more of a tool for individuals to really, I don't want to say police, but I'll say police how their data is accessed and who they allow access to it, which I think is an important thing. Because I think, many of us have, I get probably once or twice a year notice a letter from some organization that I've done business with that says, we had a data breach. Sorry, here's 3 months of tracking or security for your login. Like, oh, great, thanks. But I'm just waiting to see if somebody's going to try and steal my identity or what happens. So I think that we're going to see some changes and a bit more. I think for a while it'll be probably more in your face and more visible, but it may be over time kind of trickle into the background a little bit. But it's interesting. It's just an interesting space. And sort of, during the course of my day, I get things and, go down a rabbit hole and research. And it's like, what are we going to see in the next 3 months, 6 months, 2 years? And it is fascinating. And I just would implore people to pay attention a little bit. Not you don't have to give all your attention to data security and who's tracking me and cookies and whatnot, but just be aware. It doesn't hurt to have a little bit of knowledge. And I think it goes a long way in being able to make some informed decisions about your future actions and choices.
100%. And I just thinking about the experience of a train website that I was using in the UK to get around. Yes, it wasn't really easy to reject all. It gave me functional cookies, these 4 things. It gave me marketing. It gave me each thing and different things I had to manually toggle and even get to the specific of 42 vendors would be, using this from our site or 100 and something. So I could see how many other companies would get my information and potentially send me things to interact with. And I found that fascinating, but it's also, are you going to be intentional and take the time to go through all of those? And the answer is you need to. Now, of course, when we get to where we're going and we have these agents that I can just have my agents, I can say, go on, figure out what, email addresses are in a breach somewhere, change the passwords. honestly, probably a lot of them are websites I haven't used in a long time. So if I try to go in and use the password, it'll say, oh, you're not valid, you're not a customer anymore. So it doesn't even matter. But go in and do that, or go into these websites and here's how I want you to, toggle my cookies. So that we can take some of that out of our minds, but with intention still, because our agents know what we want to do.
Well, and this is, I don't know, this just kind of came to my mind as an analogy, and I don't, maybe it's a little odd, but so if you go to a party, and I'm going to put this kind of think about like a brand, like, okay, I see a brand, I see a person at a party, and they look interesting, and you want to talk to them, you have a good conversation, say, hey, let's exchange numbers, just in case, we want to talk again in the future. And then what if you then find out that that person you gave your number for shared it with 42 people? Like, wouldn't you say like, well, wait a minute, that wasn't part of the deal? Or at least you say, have the ability to go back and ideally, again, as you mentioned, like maybe an agentic way to go in and refine those 42 other partners based on some criteria that you've set. So it is interesting. And I know it maybe is for a little bit scary for some folks to think about it. But again, I think a little bit of knowledge goes a long way in just being aware of some additional layers of decisions that kind of we all now have to make as consumers.
Yeah.
It's not going to get any easier. It's going to get more complicated. We're going to be tracked, and it's just kind of the world we live in today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, it's not going away. We need to adjust. We need to learn what we're willing to sacrifice or what we're willing to come down on. And I think that's really important for us as consumers, but it's also important for the businesses that want our business, or we as business owners need to understand about this transformation that's happening.
Absolutely.
And these younger generations who are digital natives and who are looking at things very, very differently than we are.
Well, that's true. And I think there's a generational difference in, just kind of going with the flow and, hey, they've got my information, they're going to track me. That's just the way things are, versus perhaps those folks on my end of the age spectrum that have been around a little while are a little bit more cautious. And, because I'm one of the, I guess, what am I, Gen X, that I grew up in analog, but my professional life has been in digital.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, I see the benefits of both sides.
Right.
But it is a very different world than things used to be. So, but again, it's also fascinating. I think there's opportunity. And I think one of the interesting things that I would suggest for marketers is that, we often get caught up in, oh, somebody has this profile or these cookies or this trail of information that they've pursued in the past. So we'll just feed them that same thing in the future.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that business owners and brands need to still keep in mind is that I think as humans, we are kind of inherently about discovery and wanting to find new things, new ways, new experiences. And that's also part of the mix. So you've got this balance, again, kind of back to the data strategy about how are you going to use this to, one, safeguard your client information, develop and foster loyalty with them by giving them the things that they have shown in the past they want, but also have this avenue for discovery and learning new things, learning about new products, services, different brands. And I think that, again, it's balance. I think we also have a tendency to look at things black and white, and it's like, it's either this or it's that. And reality is that it's always in the gray. We're always in the gray.
But you've been on the Mediascape podcast, so you know my connections to USC, and the class I'm teaching right now, we're talking about content licensing, distribution, time, territory, those concepts, but also what mix of professionally produced content do you need versus user-generated content. And some of the things that we have as discussion prompts, my students are talking about, because even the ones that are in those younger generations, they might have grown up with a big box TV and cable and quickly made that transition to VHS, to DVDs, to then Netflix sending DVDs in the mail, to then Netflix being streaming, and now OTT, and even shifting from long form content to now they're going to school, they're working, they may have families. So now they're moving into this other phase of I can only consume short form content. And so they're loving 6, 8 minute reels, right? They're
Yeah.
loving these like I'm seeing a lot also about these short form movie channels or apps where you're watching things in 8 second or 1 minute increments to get a whole show. And so as marketers, I also think we really have to understand what approach we need to take and how we're sharing information in the format that consumers want these days. And I think this
Oh.
takes us around to your idea of being a responsible capitalist. And that's something that all the generations that are younger than us are also very much wanting to see. So can you talk a little bit about that concept? I'm sure you have some other things you want to share about the formats of UGC and how we're actually sharing information with people too.
Well, yeah, and I think, it's put in the context of we're living in interesting times right now.
We're in the
Not-
in-between times, as some
Yeah.
say.
And I think that being a responsible capitalist, I mean, there are many news stories right now coming out about some of those that have been like perhaps overly aggressive in their willingness and ability to accumulate wealth.
Hmm.
And wealth is not a bad thing. I mean, it certainly allows certain things, but it also, I think, can be like anything, any, say, edible thing that you like to eat. If you eat too much of it, you're going to get a stomach ache. You're going to get yourself sick. And that's, I guess, another interesting analogy that I just kind of came up with off the top of my head. But, there's within reason. There's nothing wrong with going out, producing a good, selling a good, having people pay you for it as they should for that time and effort and knowledge that you put into it. But there's also, some things that are just, personally, it rubs me a bit the wrong way when it just seems like it's an extra way to squeeze a extra couple of cents or dollars out of a consumer when is that really what that consumer is looking for and expecting from that brand? And again, it goes back to trust.
Yeah.
So everything kind of comes full circle to that trust aspect. So yeah, being a responsible capitalist is, I think, again, producing something that adds value to a market. And if you can, broader society, thumbs up. That's great. That's hopefully what most of us are striving for. But there are instances where I do think that organizations, entities, sometimes individuals have kind of stepped beyond really what I feel is my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And, I think that also will come back to people, again, looking at data and information to say, maybe that brand is not for me, or it's not for me anymore. And I think we're seeing that with Tesla. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but there's others out there, and they're not the only one that, that brand is kind of perceived as maybe I want to distance myself from that. And I mean, we all live here in Seattle and we are like EV nirvana up here. But I have noticed that there's, just looking at the brands, there are more and more diverse EV brands up here than if you look back 2 years ago, it was pretty much a Tesla on every block. That's
Right.
not the case anymore. And that's, I think, a good positive thing because you get more diversity in the market, diverse brand experiences, different types of consumers coming into, just kind of along this EV riff here is like, that's a good thing. Again, as you can kind of distribute the brand experiences over both diverse experiences with one brand, but also diversity amongst a consumer base and how they patronize the brand. I think that's a positive. I think that, just being sort of a monotone way of approaching the market and, perhaps, selling to one type of individual or one type of individual only patronizing one type of brand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it goes both ways. Diversity, I think, is never a bad thing. And it always seems to enrich those that get experienced with things that they hadn't previously been exposed to before.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with all of those points. And I think that's as we are, there are a lot of brands that we don't know, but they shift from one value set to, oh, we're going to do this now because the market conditions we're worried about this or that happening, whether it's from the government or other economic indicators. So it's almost like as a consumer, we get whiplash sometimes of, okay, which brand, do we trust them now? Do we not trust them? Do we look at something like a large online purveyor who we might not like, but then we look at the small brands that it's actually helping that we might not have access to, right? So we have all these things to weigh. So before we go, I mean, we can go off on so many tangents. And this is honestly one of my favorite types of conversations to have on the podcast and off the podcast. But I want to get into how all of these things tie back to the work that you do with clients every day. And because you said you're also looking at the current iteration of the Matters Group and then perhaps the future iteration.
Yeah, well, I think it's generally like trying to develop something of value, some services of value, whether it's developing tools, developing processes, or just education about what this means for marketers today, looking into the future. That's one of the things I kind of feel I enjoy doing. But also, I think it adds value to have someone else's perspective. We do similar things. We look into the future and say, hey, how can this be leveraged? What do we need to be aware of? What are the opportunities? And then try and formulate some strategies and execution plans for clients. And so to me, I enjoy doing that, just to kind of absorb it, distill it, and say, hey, client, here's how I think this can impact you. And here's some things to watch out for. Here's some things that I think are opportunities to explore and test. And so for, what is next for me, is the data strategy piece, is being able to talk to small and mid-sized companies, marketers, primarily the marketing team, about what are some of the considerations that they need to have. Again, I know it hasn't been forefront for a lot of mid-sized marketers because they're strapped for resources, and they're executing their initiatives, which are most likely, again, around customer acquisition and loyalty and the brand.
Yeah.
The other aspect is one I know that you're very, very much aware of, is the whole AI piece. And that, and I would say governance and data, these are the three things that right now are sort of swirling around in my head. And they're all very much connected and interrelated. One of the things I didn't mention earlier, but after the data strategy sort of deep dive I did, the second one I did was really into looking at, why do AI projects fail? And, there's figures out there about 85%, just don't return what the initial ROI target was. So the next thing I'm doing and putting together, and we'll also be sharing with our clients, is like, how do you develop a good project plan for AI projects that are not as rigid as waterfall, but a bit of waterfall project management, maybe a little bit more structured than agile, but also accommodate some of the iterative aspects of AI, because this is very much an evolutionary state right now. I mean, I was reading some articles this morning about GPT-5 is about to come out any day, they're saying, and that's supposedly going to just blow the doors off 4 and 4.5, which blew the doors off 3. So we've got all these toys and shiny objects that you just want to play with and dig into, but how do you take a little bit of a measured approach to set yourself and your organization up so you don't get tripped up? Yeah. And again, I think that's with some understanding of data strategy, governance around that, but also an approach to developing and implementing AI that isn't a big drag on resources, that actually is going to improve the likelihood that that's going to become an asset for your organization, whether it's a new process that's streamlined, a new opportunity in the market that's opened up, efficiencies gained. So again, these are the things that occupy my day. And I think that if we can, as consultants, help others, brand owners, marketers, wherever you are in the organization, help them understand what these opportunities are about. One, that makes me feel good, because I feel like me sitting in front of a screen for 8 hours a day was worth it when I can share something with somebody else and they benefit from it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm leading with the next version of Matters, is to kind of get outside marketing, but within the marketing context, and just say, hey, these three things of how to manage a project that can go sideways real quick, how to be aware of the governance and the framework that works for your organization, and then also protecting that data and making sure that it is the asset that it can be, and it's leveraged for good and benefit on both the consumer side and the brand side. Those are the things that I enjoy doing, and I hope I can impart some knowledge on those folks that trust me with to share it with them.
Yeah. Well, thinking about that, because you did say also the teams, the marketers, A lot of times they are resource strapped, whether that's in human capital, financial capital, product launches, tariffs, whatever the case may be. They have all these other things to consider on how they're going to actually reach the ideal customer at the right time, at the right place, continue to engage with existing customers. And now they have all these other things that they have to think about if they weren't thinking about them before that probably should be baked in, right, to any business. But if you who had the foresight, how are you finding the temperature of the room when you're helping people think about and perhaps make a transition? Because we know that websites as they exist now are not going to exist. We know that search has changed tremendously, and maybe what they're being sold as the way to advertise or grow their customer base is not the most efficient. But these are still, there's people are used to tried and true ways of doing things and maybe starting to do a little bit of stuff with AI. But how do you help make that shift in mindset?
Well, it's interesting because I think if you look at media, you might think that the whole world has adopted AI and it's done and we're moving forward and no more worries. That's not the case. Even in the largest of organizations, there may be some groups that are top tier performers within that space, but there are other groups that might be struggling. And this could be within the same organization. You might have folks that just, maybe there's a leader in that team that is data savvy or governance savvy or AI savvy, and they're able to lead the team and do so in a way that does not end up in a negative situation. I'd say that's the rare case. Even if you could pick your name of who you think the company that's most on it right now, they're firing on all cylinders. I can guarantee you that there is at least one group out there that's feeling like they're floundering in this area. And the temperature, I think, is lukewarm. There's maybe, some sound bites that come from the top that say, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that. But I think when you come into like, how is this actually being operationalized? That's a whole other ball game. And that's a lot of times where people get tripped up. It's like, hey, you can talk about big vision and you're going to do this, that, and the other thing, and it's going to be wonderful. But now if that team has not been upskilled, if that team is just expected to fall in line and do something, but without guidance and support, I find that that's actually, it doesn't honestly really matter what the CEO says because he or she is not doing it. It's those folks below who then say, I need help. They raise their hand. They call people like us to help them out. And I think we're in that phase and we're going to be in that phase for a long time because it's not just a move from, I'm going to date myself again as I've done many times on these podcasts is when the websites came out and like, oh, why do I need a website? And then the first websites were static and then e-commerce. And it was always that, well, why do I need this? Well, we're in what that was 20 years ago. The world of AI and data is times X or 10 times X right now. And there's a lot of these issues were not things that I had no curriculum. And when I went to college about data in my marketing classes, that's cool because I've seen that change now, which is great. But, there's a whole lot of folks out there that are making decisions about how to allocate resources. And they quite honestly are just not dialed into the way things are and the way things are changing. And that can be scary for organizations. It can be scary for teams because like I'm asked to do something and use these tools that I have no idea how to use them. I guess you could say that's why there's a consulting industry.
I guess so. Well, yeah. And to that point, I think a lot of this shift is going to have to happen bottom up because people are going to say, hey, I've been using this tool, even though it's not necessarily on this approved list, and I'm finding these efficiencies in my workflows. And I think if we all implement, or people are saying, okay, we have, Microsoft Copilot for the whole company, but they're not giving the training on how to use.
Yes, exactly.
And that's just one tool to use. It's, speaking of those large organizations, I think of a very popular social media conglomerate. I had a friend working there in taxonomy, and she had 3 or 4 levels of directors and VPs above her, and none of them knew how to do her job. None of them knew how to label data. None of them really understood what taxonomy was. And so when you think about the trust that we have in these organizations to trust with our marketing and our advertising budgets, with our information, and the fact that many of those people, there might be future visioning about getting to, other parts of getting to augmented intelligence, right? And getting to other
The real
areas.
scary stuff.
Yeah, the real scary stuff, but they're not even realizing that they aren't even like super great at this other stuff that we rely on them for. So
No, I kind of make a joke like, that's why there's a consulting industry. But, there's some of it too is just having that curiosity to say, you know what, and being okay with, I'm going to spend a day and kind of play with this tool. I'm not going to probably get what I envision I'm going to get, but I'm going to play with it. And I have that kind of curiosity to motivate me to learn. And, everything has two sides to it. Yes, there may be some messaging coming down that says we're going to do this with AI and blah, blah, blah. But there's also has to be a receiver of that message that says, yes, but, so from that bottom up, yes, but I need your support that I can make this mistake. I can explore and experiment and go through this, tying it back to earlier, discovery about something that I believe will have a positive impact on my environment and those that I serve and myself. And I think that's also a key part too, is just, have a little bit of curiosity about what's out there. Don't necessarily think that, or follow all the headlines that, say, oh, AI is going to do this, that. It is what you make it to be.
mm-hmm.
And it is a tool, and it's how you use the tool. I mean, I can use a hammer and I hit my thumb while I'm trying to nail in something into a board. And am I going to curse out the hammer? No, it's not going to do much for me. It might make me feel better, but so again, I think it's a very dynamic time. It's a lot going on. There's a lot of noise. Cutting through that is important, but I think having a good direction of where individually we want to go, what our place is in the environment that we are in, whether it's work or personal life, and being curious, but being able to ask some good questions too.
Yeah. Gosh, there's so much more we could uncover in this conversation, but we'll leave it here, and I will bring you back on in another 6 months to see where we're at then. Eric,
Sure.
I
That'll be
understand.
exciting.
Yeah. I understand that you're also offering a free 30-minute session with anybody who does want to dive into marketing, data privacy, brand strategy, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, again, it kind of spans a lot. It seems like I'm just throwing all things out there, but that's kind of the time we're in right now. And so, yeah, there's a lot of topics that are on people's minds right now. I've been around a while, about 30 years in digital marketing, run agencies, run programs for big companies, been a management consultant too for a little bit. Hopefully that's not a bad thing. But yeah, I'm happy to just have a conversation with folks. And if I can impart a little bit of knowledge or spark a light bulb kind of opportunity for them, that's what I enjoy to do. So I'm happy to offer that up.
Amazing. And the best place, because we're going to lead people to your website, we'll also, of course, have your LinkedIn linked in the show notes. So where should people reach out to you about this opportunity?
Yeah, matters.com, which is actually the URL is thematters.group. So that's a little confusing, kind of not your normal website URL, but also Eric L at the matters.group. That's my email. That's where I hang out all day, and or LinkedIn. That's maybe the easiest. Is easy to find and no confusing URLs. To just DM me and let me know what you're thinking about and what's on your mind.
Yeah, and follow Eric's newsletter on LinkedIn. You'll get a lot of really great information about this and much more than what we've been able to cover in our time together today. Eric, do you have a quote, mantra, motto, verse, poem, words that continue to inspire you?
There is one. There is one quote from a musician that really helped shape my early teenage years. And again, I'm going to date myself, late 70s, early 80s. But Joe Strummer, the founder and lead singer of The Clash, has and also there's a great film of the same title as this quote, but he said that the future is unwritten. And I think that's so true. I mean, we have the pen and we can write it. And his music too, great Their Clash is an epic band of all time. Check out their catalog if you're not familiar with them. But yeah, the future is unwritten. So, just grab the pen and write it. Make it what you want to be.
Love it. Perfect for these in-between times, as we talked about earlier, and figuring out what the world is going to look like and being proactively part of that instead of sitting and letting everything pass us by. So this has been such a fun conversation. I feel so excited and rejuvenated and ready to tackle the world now, Eric. So thank you.
Well, it's 11 o'clock, so we still have the day and today to go tackle the world and do something great.
Fantastic. Thank you to everyone who's watching this episode or listening to it. And thank you so much for getting us to where we are today, celebrating 6 years of this podcast. Now sitting pretty steady at the number 8 on the US Apple marketing podcast charts. Something that I didn't necessarily ever think would happen as an indie podcaster. So just another encouragement for everybody listening to go out, tackle things, keep trying things, and you'll get to where you want to go, one step at a time. And with that, I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their story, their journey, or have a random conversation like Eric and I had today. Random, not so random. So have a beautiful day until then. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.